Recognized to explain the provisions of Senate Bill 834. Senator Daniels request to work from a committee sub. Without objection, that'll be the order. Senator Daniels.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this bill is to organize, make more consistent and clear and uniform the different definitions and exceptions surrounding all of our pro-life laws in Oklahoma. I move to pass and yield for questions.
Second.
Do pass by Senator Daniels, a second by Senator Montgomery. Will there be questions of the author? Senator Hicks for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you walk me through what these exceptions are and why we're seeing this piece of legislation today?
Thank you. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we're trying to establish uniformity and clarity because some of these statutes have been passed over many years, from 1910 right the way until 2022. And sometimes the language or the linguistics change, or we have used a definition in more recent years that would better apply to statutes that were passed and adopted in the past. So that's why we're going through and doing this, and also clarifying exceptions in our law that we allow for contraception, in vitro fertilization, the delivery of ectopic pregnancies, and the treatment of miscarriages. Just want to make sure all that language appears everywhere in the law so that there is no confusion.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so with these exceptions, what are the requirements on the individual in order to access medical treatment?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure that I understand the question.
For clarification.
Clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What must the individual do in order to access medical treatment that's provided for in this piece of legislation?
Well, certainly, in terms of anything that would result in an abortion, we have specific exceptions in here that are defined, as I said, for in vitro fertilization, ectopic pregnancy, miscarriage, the delivery of an unborn child. Let me see here. Diagnosis, treatment of infertility, save the life or preserve the health of the unborn child, remove an unborn child whose death was caused by miscarriage or spontaneous abortion, remove an ectopic pregnancy. We also have provided in here an exception for rape reported to law enforcement or incest of a minor reported to law enforcement. I believe that covers most of them.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so in reporting to law enforcement, why are we putting that particular measure as a requirement for an individual to access medical treatment?
Thank you. I'd also like to add to my last question, we've also thoroughly defined medical emergency in the law when it would be appropriate to deliver the child to save the life of the mother, and that would also include when she faces some major impairment of a major bodily function, would also be a time in which a healthcare provider using reasonable medical judgment with the woman could make the determination that it would be necessary to go ahead and deliver the child prematurely. Now, as to the rape and incest, that language appeared last year in House Bill 4327 when we provided for the civil action against an abortionist, and we put that in there as a way to have some sense of, validating by reporting to law enforcement.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So are we saying that we don't trust women who are accessing medical treatment because they've been raped or been the victim of incest?
Thank you for the question. We're simply asking for a report to law enforcement, and I will add here that we have statistics that this situation, according to one abortion organization, combined with life of the mother, happens in less than 3% of the cases of women who go to abort a child. So we're not talking about a large number, and in fact probably would be almost never used, but it is good to specify in the law that we allow for the exception with some verification by requiring a report to law enforcement, and that's all that's required.
Senator Stanridge for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, you said a number there that's interesting. We struggle with, pro-life abortion, stopping abortion in the state for decades, many decades. And many in this body, including yourself, has worked hard to do that. I heard a number in your answer there that is interesting. Are you saying that this bill eliminates abortion in at least 97% of the time? Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. I was giving an example that comes from another state, but it is our goal here to save as many unborn lives as possible, but allow for some exceptions, and that particular exception is one that, from all the research that I have seen and read, and this is quite a bit, and from the people with National Right to Life and the Susan B. Anthony Organization have done lots of research on this. This is an exception that is widely welcomed by the general public, even though we know it is rarely used and certainly would not be a reason for abortionists to come back to the state of Oklahoma. They are not here now, and that particular exception would not result in their return. So, in answer to your question, yes, by allowing for this exception to be standardized, it's already in part of our statute, standardized across our pro-life statute, this would ensure that, maybe I could say 99.999 because so rarely used, I can't put a figure on it, but I'm comfortable that we would still be a very pro-life state with abortion not allowed after conception except in these limited circumstances.
Senator Hicks for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To follow up on my previous line of questioning, is it true that rape is the most underreported crime, not only in Oklahoma, but in our country?
Thank you for the question. I appreciate the information.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it also true that Oklahoma ranks number 9 nationally in numbers for rape and sexual assault?
Thank you for the question. That's very good information.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it also true that 1 in 3 high school females will be sexually assaulted in the state of Oklahoma before they graduate high school?
I appreciate the information.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And is it also true that we know that less than 20% of those will be reported to the police?
I appreciate the information.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the process for reporting a sexual assault to the police?
Thank you for the question. I suppose that could differ between different police departments. I know in my own police department, my police chief told me you simply come and report, and there's a form, and that's all that's needed.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so is it not also a requirement that the individual undergo a physical examination at the time that the crime is reported?
Thank you for the question. That depends on whether or not the police department then proceeds to use resources to investigate a crime, and many of the women who come and report these assaults do not wish to pursue charges, so those steps would not be taken.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And why do you think that is?
Thank you. I believe that's a hypothetical question asking for an opinion of me, and it has nothing to do with the language in my bill.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To go back to the language in the bill, knowing, again, that rape is the most underreported crime nationally and also in Oklahoma, 6% of that less than 20% that actually report to the police lead to an arrest. Do you feel that victimizing individuals a second time in order to report to the police will be a positive outcome for our state?
Thank you for the question. It's the intent of this bill and clarifying this language to save as many unborn children as possible. It's my hope that if a woman did go and report to law enforcement, that in between that time and the time at which she might seek an abortion, she would have a change of heart and go ahead and have the child. But we've provided the exception just in case it's needed, but we have documentation or data that says it's rarely used.
Further questions? Seeing none. Senator Hicks for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was yielding, but if none of my colleagues have any additional questions, I do have a different line of questioning, if that's okay at this time.
Senator Hicks, as long as it stays germane to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're requiring a report on ectopic pregnancies. Could you elaborate and explain why that must be reported to the State Department of Health?
I'm not sure if that report is already required, but yes, we do have a new Section 18 at the back that in certain circumstances for gathering data and keeping statistics on these things, that we have certain of these situations reported to the Department of Health with very appropriate and vigorous protections for identity. This is simply for data gathering purposes, not to identify any particular individual patient.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry if I missed that in the explanation, but are you saying that this data is already currently being collected?
In some situations in the law, if you go through, you will find some of the language already requires it. And in fact, one of the sections we're repealing at the end was the physician reporting requirements to the department. We've decided to get rid of that section and standardize it in Section 18 and make it apply throughout. So we've reworked the way that's done, but certainly reporting in some circumstances is already required.
Further questions? Seeing none, will there be debate? Seeing none, Senator Daniels, would you like to close debate? Senator Daniels waives. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Daniels? Aye. Senator Hicks? Aye. Senator Montgomery? Aye. Senator Pemberton? Aye. Senator Prieto? Aye. Senator Pugh? Aye. Senator Standridge? Aye. Senator Stanley? Aye. Senator Young? Aye. Senator Haste? Aye. Senator Sino?
Aye.
9 ayes, 2 nays.
Having received 9 ayes and 2 nays, I declare Senate Bill 834 to have passed.